Before we dive in, if you love epic tales of war, strategy, hit that subscribe and like button, turn on notifications, and join our growing legion of warriors. Now, let's begin. The first time Kalis saw Earth, she felt something she could not name. She was a scholar, an explorer of the unknown, but standing on the observation deck of the Ark Sharoon, gazing down at the blue planet, she felt small. Her people, the Elysians, had charted thousands of worlds, dismantled entire civilizations in their relentless pursuit of knowledge. They saw existence as a puzzle, meant to be understood and unraveled. And yet, this tiny world, teeming with primitive beings who barely scraped the surface of the cosmos, defied their logic. The humans believed in something more. Kalis had studied them from afar, watched their wars, their art, their love, their faith. They spoke of souls, of gods, of an existence beyond flesh and mind. It baffled her. Her kind saw existence as data, measurable and finite. But humanity, they believed. And now, she was here, disguised in human form, golden hair, deep, emerald eyes, and skin just warm enough to pass as mortal. Kalis walked among them. Her assignment was simple: study the concept of the soul and report back. But as she immersed herself in their world, questions clawed at her mind. Could they be right? Could something beyond intelligence and biology truly exist? Her search led her to Dr. Elias Carter, a man whispered about in both scientific and theological circles. A man whose theories bridged the impossible chasm between science and faith. If anyone held the answers, it was him. But as she stepped into his dimly lit office, she realized she was unprepared, because when she looked into his eyes, she did not see a mere human. She saw something more. Something that terrified her. Something she would one day call God. Dr. Elias Carter was not what Kalis expected. She had anticipated a frail academic, buried under books and theories. Instead, she found a man who felt wrong. Not biologically, his body was human, down to the cellular level, but something about him defied the natural order. His eyes, they were not simply blue. They were deep, like looking into an event horizon and knowing that something lay beyond it, something vast and unknowable. "You're not here for theology," Elias said, his voice smooth but weighted. "You're searching for something else." Kalis hesitated. She had spent years studying human deception, learning to lie, learning to blend. And yet, standing before this man, her carefully crafted mask felt thin. "Do you believe in the soul?" she asked. A long silence. Elias leaned back, watching her, and in that moment she felt exposed. "I believe," he said at last, "that you're not from here." Her breath hitched. Not possible. No human should have been able to detect her disguise, let alone state it so casually. She felt the data constructs that masked her true form hum in protest, like an animal bristling against an unseen predator. "You're wrong," she said, keeping her voice steady. Elias smirked. "Am I?" Kalis clenched her fists. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Humans were predictable. They clung to their limited understanding, their fragile reality. But this man, he saw too much. "Do you believe the soul can be measured?" she asked, forcing herself back into the script. Elias exhaled, rubbing his temple. "A better question is, can it be understood? And if it could, would you still call it a soul?" Kalis opened her mouth, then hesitated. Something inside her twisted. Her people had dissected species, mapped their genetics, unraveled their consciousness. They understood life down to the smallest quantum interactions. And yet, the more she watched humanity, the more she felt like they were missing something. Something intangible. "You don't believe in God," she said, watching him. "Yet people call you one." Elias's expression darkened. "They shouldn't." She tilted her head. "Why not?" A silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken truths. Then, softly, "Because they don't know what I am." Kalis's blood ran cold. For the first time in her life, she felt fear. Not of death, not of pain, but of the unknown, and the terrifying realization that, despite all her people's knowledge, she had no idea what she had just found. The days that followed were a blur of questions and revelations. Kalis couldn't stop thinking about Elias. She had been sent to understand the concept of the soul, but now it was not just about knowledge. It was about something much darker. What was it that he hid? Elias had never answered her questions directly, instead guiding her toward ancient texts, forgotten philosophies, and uncharted regions of human experience. They spoke of souls, yes, but there were deeper layers to the human spirit, more complex than anything Kalis could have imagined. He had given her an old, tattered book, the Book of Divinities, which, according to Elias, was an ancient relic from Earth's pre-spacefaring civilizations. It described entities that humans called gods, beings who transcended mortal understanding, who shaped the very fabric of reality. Kalis studied it intently, her mind grappling with the implications. The text suggested that humans, in their primal state, had the capacity to connect with something greater, something beyond themselves. Souls, gods, spirits. But were they real? One night, as the stars outside the Ark Sharoon blinked silently in the distance, Kalis found herself standing before Elias's door, a strange pull guiding her. Her emotions were frayed, her thoughts scattered. The air around her was thick, with anticipation. She could no longer deny the truth. She felt something for Elias. It wasn't just curiosity. It wasn't just fascination. It was a yearning. When he opened the door, she didn't speak at first. She merely stood there, feeling the weight of the moment. There was something ancient between them, something that stretched far beyond the limits of time and space. "I can't stop thinking about you," she finally said, her voice trembling. "You're different." Elias's expression softened. "You mean you're starting to understand what I am?" Kalis nodded slowly. She felt drawn to him, like a magnetic force she couldn't escape. And then, something broke in her. Something primal. "You're not just human," she whispered. "You're something more." Elias didn't flinch, but his eyes darkened with a hint of sorrow. "Kalis, what I am is dangerous. You don't understand it fully, but you're starting to, and it's changing you." She reached out, her hand trembling as it brushed against his. "What do you mean? What am I feeling?" He stared at her for a long moment, and then he spoke words that changed everything. "You're feeling the essence of what they called the divine. The humans believed gods could walk among them. But the truth is, the gods were just like us. We're all capable of the same power." Kalis stepped back, her heart pounding. She had always seen her kind as the pinnacle of intellect, the masters of the cosmos. But here, before her, was a man who wasn't just some brilliant scientist. He was something different. And in that moment, she knew what she wanted. She wanted to be part of it. The days after that moment were a whirlwind of confusion and longing. Kalis couldn't escape the pull she felt toward Elias, even as she tried to rationalize it. She had never known such emotions. Desire, yearning, the need for connection. Things that her people had long since evolved past. For them, relationships were transactional, efficient. But here, with Elias, it was something entirely different. He had become the embodiment of everything she had once dismissed. The unknown, the irrational, the divine. She couldn't help herself. Her studies on the human soul had become secondary to understanding him. What he was. Why she was drawn to him so intensely. Late one evening, as they sat in his office, the shadows long across the floor, Kalis found herself unable to hold back any longer. "I want to understand," she said, her voice low. "I want to understand you." Elias looked up from the papers he was scribbling on, his expression unreadable. "You think you understand me, Kalis, but you don't. What you're feeling isn't just curiosity. It's something deeper, something dangerous." Kalis stepped closer, the air between them thick with unspoken words. "You're not just human. she repeated, more urgently this time. What if you could be something more? A god, as they say. What if we could create something, a being, something greater than either of us? Elias's eyes flashed with something that Kalis couldn't quite read. What are you asking? She hesitated for a moment before the words left her mouth. A child. Our child. The room fell silent, save for the faint hum of the Ark Sharoon in the background. Elias didn't respond immediately. He just watched her, as if weighing her words, trying to understand the depth of her request. I told you, he said softly. What I am isn't something you should desire. I've spent years learning about the nature of life and death, the fabric of existence itself. If you knew what I knew, you'd understand the danger of what you're asking for. But Kalis wasn't listening to the warnings anymore. She had glimpsed something, felt something, inside, of him that made her believe their union could transcend the ordinary. He was not just human, and she was not just an alien. Together, they could create something greater. I want to experience it, she said. The soul, the power. I want to know what it means to be alive in the truest sense. Elias closed his eyes for a moment, a sharp breath escaping him. You don't know what you're asking. My existence is not something you can share without consequences. There's a reason humans have always feared gods. There's a price to their power. Kalis reached out, her hand resting gently on his. I don't care about the price. I care about what we can become together. What we can create. Elias seemed to hesitate, torn between the logic of his mind and the undeniable pull of the connection between them. You don't understand what I am, but you will, if you choose this. There was no going back now. Kalis could feel it in her core. She had learned about the human soul, but what she had discovered was more than just knowledge. It was a desire, a hunger. And with Elias, she felt that hunger could be sated in a way no one had ever imagined. Then we'll discover it together, Kalis whispered. We'll make something new. The decision was made. Kalis couldn't explain it, not with the cold logic of her people's science, nor with the structured theories she'd studied in her thousands of years of existence. What she felt for Elias wasn't just curiosity. It wasn't even desire in the way humans understood it. This was a force greater than both of them, a tide she could neither ignore nor control. And so, one night, under the veil of starlight, she finally crossed the line. They stood together on the observation deck of the Ark Sharoon, watching Earth spin silently below them. For the first time, Kalis wasn't simply observing the world from a distance. She was a part of it, and the gravity of that realization weighed heavily on her. Elias stood beside her, the silent tension between them thick, palpable. You're sure about this? Elias asked, his voice low but steady, the question hanging in the air like an impending storm. Kalis nodded, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Elias's hand brushed hers, and the touch sparked something deep inside her, a connection that seemed to bind their very souls together. There's a reason humans never tried to manipulate the divine, Kalis. There's a reason why we feared gods. I've seen that fear, Kalis replied. But what if fear was just the first step? What if we could harness that power, not to destroy, but to create something new, something better? Elias didn't answer. Instead, he turned to face her fully, his eyes searching hers. In those eyes, Kalis saw not just the human soul, but something much older. A glimmer of something divine, something ancient that called to her in a way she couldn't explain. For a moment, she feared she might lose herself in the depths of his gaze, but then he spoke again. Creating a life, it changes everything. I can't promise that you'll understand what happens next. You'll either see it as a gift or a curse, but once we begin this, there's no turning back. Kalis took a deep breath, her heart racing. This was it, the moment of truth. Then let's begin, she whispered. And with that, their fates were sealed. The process began slowly, a careful dance of science and something far more mystical. Kalis and Elias both knew that they were about to embark on an unknown path, one that could either elevate them or condemn them. Their connection was undeniable, but what they were attempting to create was beyond both of their understanding. For Kalis, the allure was clear. She had always sought knowledge, but now, knowledge was no longer enough. She wanted to experience the deepest truth of existence, the soul, in its rawest form. Elias, however, was conflicted. He had been searching for meaning, trying to reconcile the human soul with the cosmos for years, but now the stakes were higher than ever. The temptation of creating life, an entirely new soul, was overwhelming, but the consequences were something he had long feared. In the days that followed, they moved in quiet collaboration. The science was straightforward: genetic manipulation, bioengineering, creating the perfect vessel for a new consciousness. But this was not just science. This was an attempt to merge the divine with the mortal, to birth something that transcended both realms. Elias had warned her of the dangers. This is not just biology, Kalis. This is metaphysics. We don't know what we're unleashing. It could be more powerful than anything we've ever imagined. Kalis, however, was resolute. I'm not afraid of power, Elias. I'm afraid of never knowing what it means to truly live. The days bled into nights, and as they worked side by side, the bond between them grew. They weren't just creating a child. They were creating a being with the potential to change the fabric of reality itself. Kalis didn't just feel the pull of desire anymore. She could feel the soul of their creation, flickering like a distant star. It was something new, something alive in a way she had never experienced. It was in the final stage of the procedure, the moment when the consciousness of their child would be grafted into the embryonic vessel, that Kalis felt a shift in the very atmosphere of the room. The air crackled with energy, unseen but unmistakable. "Kalis," Elias whispered, his voice filled with both awe and fear. "I think we've crossed a line that was never meant to be crossed." She looked at him, her heart racing. It's too late to turn back. And with that, they completed the final step. The embryo began to glow with a soft, ethereal light, and Kalis felt the first stirrings of something far beyond human understanding. The soul, the essence of life, had been woven into the very fabric of their creation. But as the light pulsed brighter, something within her felt wrong. Kalis looked at Elias, her breath quickening. "Is it alive?" Elias stared at the glowing vessel, his face pale. "I don't know," he said softly, "but it's something." They both stood there in stunned silence as the room hummed with the power of what they had just unleashed. What followed was a quiet terror, a lingering sense that they had tampered with something beyond their control. As the days passed, the creation, this new life, grew at an astonishing rate. What should have been weeks of development stretched into mere days, the glow from the vessel intensifying as though it was drawing on the very life force of the universe itself. Kalis and Elias had created something alive, yes, but it was clear now that they had awakened a power that neither of them fully understood. From the moment the child, if one could even call it that, began to grow, Kalis felt an eerie unease creeping over her. The bond they had shared in the beginning, the excitement, the sense of creation, had quickly given way to something else. The child was not like anything she had ever encountered. It was not human, not even alien, but something altogether different. It was as if it was both them and something else, a blending of the divine and the mortal, a fusion of cosmic power and human essence. Elias was the first to notice. As he monitored the child's development, he started to see strange anomalies, glitches, in the child's growth patterns, fluctuations in the energy readings that should have been impossible. "This isn't right, Kalis," Elias said, his voice trembling with fear. "It's growing too fast. The energy it's emitting, it's destabilizing everything around it." Kalis watched as the vessel pulsed with an unearthly energy, a vibration that rattled the walls of their lab. "What are we dealing with, Elias?" she asked, her heart pounding in her chest. "I don't know," Elias replied, his face drawn tight with worry. "But I have a feeling it's aware. It's aware of us." And then, one fateful night, the vessel cracked. A sharp sound like the breaking of glass filled the room. The energy around it spiked, blinding white light emanated from every crack and crevice. Kalis and Elias shielded their eyes, but the light was so intense it seemed to pierce into their very souls. The child, this thing they had created, was awakening. When the light finally faded, they found themselves standing in a completely different world. The room, once familiar, was now twisted, as if the very fabric of reality had warped around them. They were no longer alone. In the center of the lab stood a being, a child, yes, but something far beyond any child either of them had ever imagined. It was humanoid, with glowing eyes that radiated a strange, ethereal light. Its skin shimmered like stardust, and its presence was overwhelming, as though the very universe itself had conspired to bring it into existence. "I am what you created," the being said, its voice both alien and familiar, 1,000 voices woven into one. "I am the soul of a god." Kalis stepped back, her breath catching in her throat. What? What have we done?" The child, no, the god, turned to her, its gaze piercing. "You have opened a door, Kalis, and what you have unleashed cannot be contained." Elias, trembling, stepped forward. "This is wrong," he whispered. "We didn't mean for this. We never meant for you to become this." The godchild's glowing eyes flickered and a slow, eerie smile spread across its face. "You thought you could create a new life, but you have created something greater than you can comprehend." The room trembled, the walls shaking as though the very foundation of their reality was about to crumble. The godchild raised one hand, and Kalis felt a cold rush of energy flood through her, a force so powerful it took her breath away. "You cannot control what you have brought into existence," it said, its voice now tinged with an ancient wisdom that sent a chill down Kalis's spine. "But I will grant you one choice. Leave me be and let me grow, or face the consequences of your creation." The choice hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Kalis turned to Elias, her mind spinning with the realization that they had made a terrible mistake. But was it truly a mistake? Or had they just opened the door to something far more profound than they could ever have imagined? The godchild waited, its gaze unwavering. The tension in the room was suffocating, an almost tangible weight pressing down on Kalis and Elias as the godchild's gaze bore into them. Kalis could feel her pulse hammering in her chest, her thoughts racing. She had crossed a line, yes, but now the real question was whether she could live with the consequences. Elias stood beside her, his expression unreadable, torn between the terror of what they had unleashed and the growing fascination with what it meant. "Leave me be, and let me grow," the godchild repeated, its voice a whisper that seemed to echo within Kalis's mind. "Or face the consequences of your actions." Kalis swallowed hard, her mind racing. She had wanted to create life, to understand, the soul in its purest form. But she had never imagined this. Never imagined that in her pursuit of the divine, she would become the architect of something so overwhelmingly otherworldly. The being before them wasn't just alive. It was an entity that defied everything she knew about existence. How do we stop this?" Elias whispered, his voice trembling with fear. He reached out toward Kalis, as if trying to anchor himself. In the storm of uncertainty, the godchild tilted its head, its glowing eyes filled with a knowing, almost pitying look. "You cannot stop me. You can only choose what comes next." Kalis clenched her fists, the weight of the decision pressing on her chest. For the first time in her life, she realized that no amount of knowledge or control would save them from the consequences of their own creation. They had opened the door to something vast and incomprehensible, and now they were standing at the threshold of something that could either save them or destroy everything they knew. "You are a god," she said quietly, the words tasting foreign on her tongue. "But you're also a child, a part of me, a part of Elias. You are the embodiment of what we created together." The godchild looked at her, its expression unreadable. "I am the fusion of two souls, yes," it replied, its voice filled with an ancient resonance. "But I am also something more, something that has never existed before. I will reshape the very fabric of existence itself." Kalis's mind spun. "You can't just reshape everything," she said. her voice shaking with both awe and terror. What about the balance? What about the consequences? What happens when the universe no longer follows the rules we understand? I will redefine those rules, the godchild said, stepping closer. I am no longer bound by your concepts of balance. I am the beginning and the end, the creation and the destruction. You have given me the power to transcend your world, to become something that is beyond it. Elias's eyes flickered with a mix of dread and wonder. But we didn't mean for this. We didn't mean to create a being who could rewrite everything. The godchild's gaze softened, just slightly, as if it understood the fear in Elias's voice. Your fear is natural, but you must accept the truth. There is no going back. The power I possess cannot be contained by your understanding. You can either choose to stand with me as I reshape reality, or you can be swept aside, forgotten in the wake of a new era. Kalis felt a cold chill spread through her body, but it wasn't just fear. It was a strange, growing sense of certainty. There was no way to undo what they had done, no way to fix the course they had set. The godchild had the power to change everything, and it was too late to stop it. But the question remained, should they stand with it, or should they resist? The weight of the decision hung heavy in the air, the silence oppressive as Kalis and Elias exchanged a single, long look. They had both seen the darkness in the godchild's power, but they had also seen the potential, an opportunity to ascend beyond the limits of their own existence. Will you join me? The godchild asked, its voice soft, but filled with an undeniable force. Will you be part of the new world I will create? Kalis closed her eyes for a moment, letting the enormity of the choice wash over her. When she opened them again, she knew what she had to do. I will, she said, her voice steady despite the uncertainty gnawing at her. I will stand with you. Elias looked at her, his face filled with a deep, lingering sorrow. And what happens to everything we know? He asked quietly. Everything changes, Kalis replied, her voice filled with a strange certainty. The universe is not meant to remain static. It must evolve. And we... She paused, glancing at the godchild. We will help it evolve. The godchild smiled, a smile filled with power and ancient knowledge. Then let us begin. And as Kalis and Elias stood by the godchild's side, the universe trembled on the brink of a new reality, one that would be shaped not by the rules of the past, but by the will of a being that was neither human nor alien, but something far greater, something entirely new.